Hey everyone! First of all, this is the very first video that I am shooting with my beautiful new wallpaper that is up in my office, so this is a pretty exciting time for me. But that aside, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and this month I wanted to make a few videos that are breast related. So I'm going to be talking about different things, but I thought that I would start off by sharing a personal story. Some of you may know that my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was a teenager, and all throughout my high school years and my teen years, my mom was going through cancer treatment. Statistically, 1 in 8 women in her lifetime will be diagnosed with breast cancer. My intention for this video is to shed light on how breast cancer is a disease that touches everyone around the person who has been diagnosed. I'm going to share what I personally experienced and what I learned over the years in hopes that it can help anyone who is currently going through this, who has been through it, and who possibly may experience it in the future. I have to say that this is really the first time in my life where I have had more clarity around what I was actually experiencing when my mom had cancer. And my mom was diagnosed about 15 years ago. So I have been through 15 years of processing very complex feelings, and only now have I been able to see things more clearly. Now, as an adult, I've met various people over the years who also grew up with a sick parent. And what I've realized is that we were all experiencing the same things in our own ways. So I'm gonna lay out for you the things that I felt and the way that I have navigated those things. Denial was a pretty short and quick phase for me, but it was definitely something that I experienced because when my mom told me about her diagnosis, I was 14 years old, and I remember it was right around New Year's. She told me she was going to have surgery, but in my mind, I was like, that is so far away, I can't even imagine it, even though it really wasn't that far away. For about a week or two, everything pretty much stayed the same. My mom looked the same, she was still going to work, all the routines were still the same. There was nothing in front of me visibly that had changed. So that really put me into this space of like, everything's fine, nothing's actually going to change. But it did change. My mom had her surgery, and she also went through chemotherapy and later radiation. The way that my mom looked physically completely shifted, and it was really startling to me. And I know that my mom did her absolute best to try and make the transition as easy as possible because it was also difficult for her. The treatment that my mom was receiving was very aggressive, and there is nothing that could have prepared us for this. That really scared me, and I did pretty much everything and anything that I could to not be in the moment. I mentally checked out a lot, and I would just create fantasy worlds in my head that I could escape to. I would write and crumple up the paper and throw it away. I would rip it up. I would listen to music. I would play video games. Just anything that would allow me to not be in the present moment. A big part of resisting being in the moment with my mom while she was sick led to guilt, because a lot of that resisting meant I would come home from school and immediately run up to my room and close the door and not even look at my mom or address my mom. And that left me with so much guilt while I was dealing with it, and also in the years after. And it's something that still will trickle into my emotions when I think about it. And I just think about, like, why did I do that? Why didn't I spend time with her? I was such a terrible daughter, and I will just like punish myself over and over and over again. But now I understand what I was going through. I was, one, a teenager, and teenagers do that in general. They run upstairs, close the door, and stay in their rooms. Two, I was a teenager that was going through something that no one around me that I knew was going through, and I felt completely isolated. I didn't know how to express what I was feeling, and so I just tried to not feel them, and I tried to run away from them and run away from anything that would remind me of what I was feeling. I was so angry that I started to act out. And one of the things that I did was I stole my mom's credit card, and I went online and bought a bunch of stuff online. So obviously the stuff started to arrive, and my parents were like, where is all of this coming from? I remember my dad sitting me down, asking me what was going on, if I had ordered these things, and I lied and I said no and I denied it. Eventually, I told him that I had done it, and it was because I was afraid of not having the experience of shopping with my mom again, because something that my mom and I had done pretty regularly on the weekends is we would go out for lunch, we would go to the movies, and sometimes we would like walk around the mall and do a little shopping, even if it was just like window shopping and just looking at things. And so those are the really good experiences and memories that I had with my mom, and I was afraid of not having that ever again. I think that anger also turned into resentment, because, you know, I was looking at the other kids around me who were my age, and everyone else was like hanging out, they were having fun, they didn't have much responsibility, and they got to just be teenagers who were focused on their own life. And that wasn't my experience. I found myself in the role of sometimes having to be a caretaker, and this may not seem like a big deal to people. I think for some people, they may think, well, yeah, obviously that's what you're gonna do for someone that's sick. But when you really look at the parent-child dynamic, the parent is the one who is the caretaker for the child. And when something happens to a parent where the child then has to become the caretaker, it becomes really painful, because it is this dynamic switch that is just not expected while the child is still a kid. It is something very complex to navigate. And I was already in this place where I was feeling like I'm not having a teenage experience, and so it made me just take it out on my mom. Like, I just had so much resentment. Like, you are the reason why I am not like having the same experiences as everyone else around me, and I am having to, you know, take on more responsibility and think about things that other kids just, it's not even on their radar. Sometimes I just really felt like my mom was being selfish for being sick, and that may seem like such a cruel thing to think, but what I've learned over the years from other people that I know who grew up with sick parents while they were young is that that is pretty much what everybody thinks at some point. I think a big lesson for me has been separating my thoughts from who I am, because so often we're aligning, you know, that cruel and selfish thought with who we are. Those two things aren't necessarily aligned. And that doesn't make you a bad person, because when you are in the midst of trauma, you don't know what's up, what's down, what feelings you're going through, and you're just trying to survive that moment. You're trying to survive the next moment. You're trying to make it into the next day. And sometimes there are just things that we typically wouldn't do outside of a traumatic experience that get us through those really, really painful moments. So in a way, they serve a purpose just to help us survive. I have basically felt guilty for every single thing that I can remember while my mom was sick. I've played these moments over and over in my head, and I've gone over how I could have done things better, and I've punished myself for it. And what I've realized now is that this replaying of the past was me clinging to this idea that I was a bad person. To let go of the idea that I was a bad person because I had become so comfortable and familiar with beating myself up and punishing myself, that was really, really scary to think about myself as not a bad person. There are things that I vividly remember from these years, and there are also just complete blackout moments. And I think this is really reflective of going through intense suffering and pain and trauma, because it's almost like the brain's way of protecting you from remembering every single thing. I really think if I was able to remember everything, it would make it so much harder for me. And it has already been extremely hard figuring out like the bits and pieces that I can remember. In the midst of my mom's treatment, she had been in treatment for about 3 or 4 years at this point, my dad died. And it was something that was really unexpected. And for a long time, I had been preparing myself to possibly lose my mom, because when she was diagnosed with cancer, she was really, really close to being stage 4. And no one was really sure if she would make it through treatment. And so when my dad died, it was something where he went from being completely healthy to a week later being dead. And that was a total just like flip-flop of like the reality that I had been bracing myself for, and it sent me into even more extreme pain. You know, I just really don't remember a ton from that point in my life, because there was a lot happening and I was in some pretty deep suffering. But the last point that I really remember my mom being very, very sick was at my high school graduation. And she had just had surgery a couple days before and was so adamant about showing up at my graduation because she wanted to be there, because she knew that my dad wasn't going to be there, and she wanted to be there for me. And so lots of things happened in the years following. It wasn't an easy road by any stretch of the imagination, and it has been a journey of healing, in reflecting, and just acknowledging the feelings that I had and that I was going through and that still come up for me. This healing is also something that has affected my relationship with my mom. And, you know, I never really even thought about having a relationship with my mom because I wasn't even sure if she would live. And then when she did live and she kept living, then I started to want a relationship with her, and I started to wonder what that could look like. Now I have that, and I'm really proud of that, because it's something that I have really worked on myself, and so has she. And it's a pretty incredible thing to know someone for your entire life, to literally come from their body, to go through really difficult years, and to come out on the other side with a really amazing relationship. If I could go back in time and give myself some advice, I would start off by saying, let yourself feel whatever you need to feel. And I think as a teenager, it's hard to figure out exactly what it is that you're feeling and to put words to those feelings. But I was really resistant to just feeling in general because I thought feelings were bad. I think it would have been a huge relief and release to have acknowledged and let myself feel more. Finding a community, finding your people. I think now it is definitely a lot easier to connect with people online. You can find online groups that often translate into in-person support groups. And when I was going through my experience, it was harder to find these things online. These resources just weren't available in the same way. And I really would have loved to have found, other kids who were experiencing the same thing that I was experiencing. And even though I didn't have the same access to resources back then, there were still probably things that existed. But if I had felt okay with my feelings, I probably would have felt a little bit more comfortable with asking for help that could have led me to those groups of people. And that leads me to asking for help. Isn't this just a recurring theme in my life? Asking for help is okay. It really is though, and this is a lesson that I have to learn over and over and over. When you're experiencing something deeply painful, asking for help isn't just okay, it's actually necessary, because it's not an if you're gonna need help situation, it's a when you're gonna need help situation. For myself, I think that I just would have started with asking my parents more questions, being more open with them about what I was feeling, maybe potentially exploring the idea of therapy with them, and really just starting there first. And the last thing, which is also a recurring theme in my life, is having patience. But in this case, specifically having patience with my mom. The entire time my mom was sick, I just wanted to know what was going to happen. I just wanted to be able to see in the future. But if I had had a little bit more patience, I could have been curious and compassionate, asking her questions and just being in the space with her. I think what I've learned over the years is that I'm just not gonna have the answers for a lot of things, and it's really a practice when it comes to cultivating patience, especially when it comes to having patience around not having answers. What I have noticed by practicing patience, especially when it comes to the things that I don't know and the things that I can't change, is that it brings me a lot more peace. It has taken me half of my life to get to a point where I'm not constantly blaming myself, feeling guilty, where I'm just angry all the time. And now I'm in this space that's honestly quite unfamiliar to me, that is scary, but also really invigorating because it feels like there's so much potential. I think one of the things that is really highlighted in this space is my current relationship with my mom. All of the things that I have learned, the energy that I have put into wanting a relationship with her, her giving that back to me, I'm in a place now where I can really be of service to my mom, and I can really be there for her in moments where my mom feels discouraged and really upset about how cancer has permanently changed her body. I can be there for her. I'm able now to be supportive of her. And I think that is so healing, because for so long I felt like I wasn't there for my mom and that I was a horrible person and a horrible daughter. And all of the healing that I have done has just led to more healing, where I'm actually able to see who I am with a lot more clarity. So I just want to say that even if I had known all of these things, if I had a crystal ball to the future and I knew everything that I know now, it still would have been a mess. And I think that is just representative of life in general, especially really difficult moments and seasons of life that we experience. They're going to be messy, and you're going to be angry, you're going to be sad, you're going to be devastated, you're going to feel resentment, you're going to feel all of these things. I've come to understand in my own time that all of these things that I felt, that I experienced, served a purpose, and a lot of times they helped me just get to the next day. And now I'm at a point in my life where I've just let go of these things because they no longer serve me. And that's the lesson of a lifetime. And it has really just given me so much freedom. Okay, so that is the end of this video. Not all of the boob videos are going to be like this, I promise. This one was quite emotional for me to make, but I really wanted to make it because it's not something that I've talked about in detail before, and I really wanted to share my story because I know that I am not alone in my story, and I don't want other people to feel as alone as I felt for so many years. So I am really looking forward to this next month, because every other week I'm going to have a boob related video for you, and I just hope that you guys are excited to learn something new, to also just embrace this part of our bodies that, you know, can be a lot of things. Let's just leave it at that and explore it in another video. So make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss those videos that are coming up, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.